It's time for Catalog and Cocktails, your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, joined by Juan Cicada. Hey, Juan.
Hey Tim, how are you doing? It is well, it's not Wednesday. This is the I think this is the first time we do a live recording of
It's
our
the first time we
podcast.
did a Thursday.
Not on a Wednesday.
Is that a problem? Is that weird?
No, I don't know. Anyways, so today I love it when we actually have a guest who's like people that you've been seeing on LinkedIn, and then you actually get to meet them in person, even though we didn't have much time because there's so much stuff when we met. But now you're on the podcast. Kierra, it is such a pleasure to meet you. Kierra Dotson is the Director of AI Strategy. We're going to be talking about AI governance, everything. You're here finally on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to be on the podcast, and that we also finally got to meet in person.
Yes, and I'll be very honest and no BS. Is like it was during the day-to-day Texas, and we didn't have a chance to chat till like the end of the day, and because there's so much stuff over there. So we still need to get together and chat more. But this is the opportunity to do it now with the podcast. So
Yes, absolutely.
all right, let's do our tell and toast. It is 1:30 in the afternoon here in Austin Live, but I didn't make a cocktail, so I don't know. Kara, are you drinking anything today, or what's your favorite?
I have a chamomile tea with honey.
That's a good. What is your favorite beverage choice? Cocktail or mocktail? Usually, I'm
I
curious.
love a mule. I love a good Moscow mule. It's hard to
That's-
mess that up.
That's
Nice.
true.
Well, I happen to be in that vicinity today. I've got a dark and stormy going on. I've got a little bit of some ginger beer with some Appleton Estate Reserve 8. So only a little bit, though, because it is early in the day.
Just a little something to take the edge off.
Exactly. What about you, Juan?
I got a highball. I actually have a little bit of Japanese whiskey and some soda, which is always such a refreshing drink. Which
Oh,
is, I mean, I think we're still in spring, but it already feels like summer here in Austin. So
I have a confession. I haven't found a Japanese whiskey that I love yet. I'm sure I'll find one, but actually a highball seems like a really appropriate cocktail for a Japanese whiskey. It seems like it would work well.
maybe because Japanese whiskeys are like so.
They're a little lighter, right? So I don't know. I'm just so used to, I want like a bold bourbon,
Yeah, you won't get that from Japanese whiskey. But anyways, so much to talk about, and let's just kick it off. So, Kira, honest, no BS. What do you mean by AI governance is everyone's problem?
Yes, sure. So AI governance tends to be owned by compliance teams, with a lot of it being focused on, mapping back to controls and rules and any regulation just so the company won't get sued, so they won't lose their reputation. The issue with that is that it creates silos and then also lots of missteps, especially when it comes to audits. So I have a very technical background. I did DevOps for a number of years. And if y'all are not aware, anytime it's compliance season and you get hit with audits, it sucks to have to go in the backlog and figure out all these different things that we have to pull from all the different logs that hit our system. It'd be much better if we were already prepped for this to know exactly what to expect based off of the frameworks, the controls, the rules that the compliance team was already working with throughout their duration of being at the company. Same thing with business leaders as well, too. A lot of times they understand, okay, cool, there's this shiny new tech buzzword that's coming out. In this case, it's AI. Okay, but that's it. Okay, the conference. I was on the expo hall. They said, you just plug this in, you buy it, you get to make $1 million. Everything is fine. It's great. It's good. Just implement it. That's fine. And they also aren't thinking about the guardrails and the risks of what happens when this technology is not successfully implemented, especially when there are not a lot of rules and regulations surrounding it. And I get it, because we spent a decade, probably more than that, telling engineers, hey, you should move fast and break things. It's going to be fine. You're going to make a lot of money. And then also it was better to just ask for forgiveness later. That was the gold standard, right? But with AI, if you break the trust of your data or even your users, you can't just patch that up in the next ship that you came out. Okay, we'll just send out a new release version. It's fine. So you have to stop treating governance as like a speed bump or like some bureaucratic hurdle, and think of it as an invisible safety feature that's quietly working in the background if you do things right. Very similar to, like a car, like a seatbelt. NASCAR racers, they're driving 150 miles per hour, but they still have the seatbelt in case something happens. It increases their chances of survival. Governance increases your chances of survival.
Well, I'm
So
smiling because we didn't coordinate this. Our analogy is governance is like brakes in a car. They slow you down. They can slow down, right? So bad things don't happen, but they enable you to drive fast safely.
Yeah, you can drive faster because you have the seatbelt, because you have the brakes, right?
exactly, 100%. And the way that I think of it, especially when I've been shopping this around to engineers, not even shopping, but helping them. Governance is code. I think that engineers are supposed to be extremely accountable when it comes to governance because they are the first point of contact. They're the first people to get blamed when there's an inevitable headline that happens of, oh, data breach with X, Y, and Z, or there are some ethical concerns about how these chatbots are causing people to, or convincing people to harm themselves, X, Y, and Z. The engineers are the ones who build this. The data scientists, the technical people are the ones who are usually the first to blame because they created the software. So I've been working on something called governance as code that helps engineers to innovate faster, but also with confidence and safety in mind.
That's interesting. So, to explore a little bit, kind of what you're talking about here, I feel like, and maybe to set this up a little bit, I feel like you're right. Like governance, particularly AI governance, has started off much more as like a compliance or legal function kind of activity, and I don't know a lot of engineers out there that are building AI applications that are thinking a lot about governance in a broad way. Like I think they're thinking a little bit about it in terms of like access management, like who's allowed to have access to this, right? If they're getting a little bit more advanced with data connected to AI, then they might be thinking a little bit about like, ooh, like are people allowed to see this data? Is it okay that I'm like using, I'm exposing this data to all the users of this AI agent? But not much beyond that. So I'm very curious about like what you think is needed to really get engineers or more of the builder people involved with AI governance, and then what is this concept of governance as code that you've been working on?
Yes, sure. So the first part about what's needed to get engineers more interested in governance, a lot of it is just, of course, getting them. It's part of change management, in my opinion, where the whole organization should be understanding how AI affects them and how they should be incorporating it into their roles and responsibilities across the organization. Now, for engineers themselves, that of course starts to looking at some of the frameworks that are popular now. Like you have the NIST AI RMF, which is your risk management framework. That's almost like the de facto standard that even private and non-private sectors use. You also have the ISO 42001. And that one is just your framework for responsibility handling, deploying, and maintaining your AI systems. And then, of course, we have the big one that everyone knows because it is a global standard that is your EU AI Act. And I understand when you're looking at all this stuff, you're just like, this is just a bunch of documentation. I'm not a lawyer. But even just understanding the high level overview of what's expected of you from these can help you to map that over to a lot of the work that you're going to be doing as an engineer. And here's the thing, a lot of this is actually not new. It's just a matter of converting or translating the language of these documents. So for instance, a lot of us already have a number of technical controls we're using. I mean, configuration management, role-based access control, as you mentioned, Tim, as well too, for managing access to managing who gets access to data and who actually gets access to systems. The light went off 1 second. Okay, I'm in here.
No worries.
Data lineage tracking, model cards, which is a really big thing. Also, evals, that's very big too, but that's part of compliance. There's so many of these things that are already being done, but it feels like they're separated from compliance just because everybody is speaking a different language. So what I actually would recommend, which involves cross collaboration, is an AI governance charter. And that's more so of a foundational constitutional document that's going to establish the framework, the roles, the mission, the values, the scope of the organization for implementing AI and increasing adoption while making sure it's ethical, compliant, and also secure as well.
Hmm.
So that's one thing, but that's at an organization level. If that's not possible, you can even do it at the department and team level. The whole thing is everybody has access to this document. Everybody understands what's required of them and what they're responsible and accountable for, as well as the rules and procedures that are in place to ensure that everybody has some level of understanding of how AI systems are manufactured within the team itself.
Yeah. All right. That's a cool idea to have that kind of charter. I know sometimes people worry about things like that, like, oh, this is just another document that's being passed down from on high that I'm supposed to read and accept or whatever, right? Like, is there a particular way you recommend that can make that, much more of a kind of a collaborative activity?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way that we work together to create any type of strategies. It's a strategy document for governance. So you're just involving who the key stakeholders or the key people who will be held accountable across all the different teams, departments to join together to work on this together. It's all about collaboration. In my opinion, everybody is supposed to be equally accountable for what's happening and what's being input into the charter. That way, everybody takes it serious. When everybody's name is on the page and you see exactly who's accountable for what, it definitely has an incentive there to follow through with what you're talking about. And then as well as when there are, I mean, of course, it's easy to just write something out and then file it away. You just forget about it, right? Well, there should be a clause in there that says how often you review this charter, how often you're doing audits, how often you are checking for governance as code, checking to make sure that any new use cases you come up with are monitored. If there's like a risk here for how risky it is to, act out or implement this use case. Also, inventory. Who is using what when it comes to AI? Are there third-party vendors that we're using with their models? Are we building in-house stuff? Who has access to these things? By keeping everything in one centralized place, it makes it easier for everybody to understand and be on the same page about what's happening within the entire ecosystem itself. And it sounds really messy and something that could be difficult to implement immediately. But I always like to think of, start small and work your way up. You don't have to have a perfect charter. You don't think of it as something that's immutable. It's something that is a working document, and you continue to expand upon it as your AI systems get better, as you get a better understanding of how AI is going to be implemented in your business and operating model. And then, of course, as you just mature as a company.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, and I like that you're really talking about this more as like a participatory model, because in that sense, and this goes back to your comment that like AI governance is for everyone. Everyone has to participate in that and help with that. Kind of reminds me of I think that a lot of cybersecurity programs have done a good job of getting people to realize like, hey, security is a whole company problem. You're writing your password on a Post-it note, like bad idea, right? Like you're holding the door open and letting people in, bad idea, right? It's similar kind of concepts apply to the AI governance space as well.
It's a now that you bring that up, it's like security. Like we all do security training and ethics training, like something we have to go do. Like entire company, like I finished my ethics training in here this week, so we all go through that stuff. And it's a cultural thing. I remember who we had a guest once who were talking about this, and they're like, if you walk into the office and you see a hole in the wall, what are you gonna do? Are you just gonna like take a paint and cover it so like nobody knows, or you're just gonna walk it out? Like, no, you're obviously gonna go do something about that stuff, right? You're not like that's kind of common sense, like, and we need to be able to bring all this governance kind of to that mindset. But then there's two things I want to bring up. I want your thoughts and how about this? One is, and actually before we started the podcast, somebody already commented about this, incentives. Because how do we set up the incentive mechanisms for this, right? Because incentives can be the carrot and the stick. So I'm curious about your experience. What is the incentives around this stuff? And then the second one, I forgot. Anyways, then let's go with incentives.
Start with incentives. All right.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the first one for me, that's something I've been working on with the current client, is performance evaluation. So we've been working on implementing ethical AI stewardship as part of the KPIs that you look at for your performance review. And that's not just at the engineering level, that would also be at the executive level as well too, just to ensure that everybody is on the same page and really dedicated to that AI vision that the company has. And it also, yeah, that's a huge incentive. You hit that metric, you get a bonus, you get a promotion, X, Y, and Z. So of course, and that's the heaviest incentive there. There's also the tech debt incentive, right? If there's no audits, as I mentioned before, you're going to have to give up some logs or something for auditing at some point. So would you rather have all of your monitoring in place to be able to pull and export that data? Or would you rather have to dig through the trenches and see and try and remember what's going on, even if you have the right logs for the whole auditing process? So you're really just simplifying the amount of work that you have to do in the long term by having that implemented as governance as code, which I'll get into in a little bit. And then the third one is psychological safety. No engineer wants to be the person who accidentally leaked data or PII or even deployed a biased model that made the news. That's incredibly embarrassing. I remember, anytime something happens, we'll see something that happened, or like, there's issues with a mortgage loan process. They automatically denied a subset of people. That has to be incredibly embarrassing and the worst thing to wake up to when you go into the office in the morning and you're the one that was responsible for that. What do you even do? No one wants to have that. And then if you think about it from the flip side, a lot of us are even scared to use AI this today because we're like, oh man, is there going to be another data leak? I get about 15 phone calls a day from random loan people telling me I've been approved for like a $60,000 loan. And I'm like, I haven't applied for loans anywhere. So my data got leaked somewhere. So just think, it's also part of product of just thinking of what would happen to you if you were the user of this product as well. But yeah, those are the three incentives: performance, tech debt, and psychological safety.
Yeah. There's an
Hey,
empathy aspect.
thank you
to
for
that,
being
too.
very explicit with that. Three
Mhm.
things. Very, very well said. I remember my other one is there is so much governance, right? We have AI governance, and now right, there's data governance, and then there's security, right? There's risk, RSG, right? There's corporate governance, right? So there's just so much of the stuff that is just overwhelming. And at the end of the day, people are like, well, they see it as like the naysayers and so forth, right? So there's already so much governance, and now we're saying they got to add one more, which is AI governance. Like, how are you seeing people? Like, are they realizing this should be just one umbrella of governance and everything connected, or is this still kind of be still siloed within all the different types of governance? Because there's silos within the AI governance and there's silos within the data governance, and you're saying there's silos across all the governance. And like, how do you see this actually kind of coming together, or not?
Yeah, so absolutely no to silos. That makes no sense for obvious reasons, as we know. I like to think of it of everybody working in tandem, in collaboration with each other. Also, because I just have a DevOps background, CI/CD is the nature of how I operate, anyways. Even as I'm sitting in leadership and interfacing with executives and board members. So I always like to say, with tech, there's always something new happening every single day. So you don't have to feel like you have to jump on everything immediately and then also do it perfectly. A lot of it is more so understanding that you're going to have to iterate everything over time. Just like I said with the governance charter, it's a working document. So as you are equipped with new information, you find ways to implement that. You start small, see if something works, if the change works. If it does, then you can expand the scope or increase the scope. If that's not right, you shouldn't. That should be a gate. You don't want to keep. You don't want to keep just jumping to the next thing before the previous thing is implemented. Otherwise, you are essentially doing the opposite of what you wanted to do, which was decrease risk. It's okay to not have everything figured out immediately. It's better to have some type of controls implemented, even if they're across different sectors, like the data governance, the AI governance, and figuring out how they work, than to try to do everything all at once, or even just really is like a smorgasbord of things going on where everybody keeps to themselves. It's
Mhm.
all collaboration. At the end of the day, we all, or the business wants to make more money. They want to increase operational efficiency.
So let me play. I agree with you, but let me go to push. Well, I agree with you, but let me push back on something. Let me push is if it's everybody's collaborating, then nobody owns it, right? It's everywhere. Everybody's doing. So who's actually taking the ownership and accountability? So you have, for example, let's talk about it from an executive perspective, right? You have data governance been going to the CDO, right? But now there is AI governance, and is that the CDO or is there another CAI, whatever it is, right? But then you have risk and compliance, and there may be a compliance officer on this stuff, right? And there's a cybersecurity which goes to the CISO. Like everyone has their own thing.
Yeah.
Like at the end, where does it boil up to, or because that's where I see kind of where this ends up breaking up. I'm just
Yeah. So that one's the tough one, mainly because every organization is not the same. I can't make an org chart that's supposed to be the de facto standard for all of them. Depends on their business goals, if they are a tech company or not. Of course, in my mind, the CISO is more so under security when I first think about all this. Privacy, all these things boil under security if we're going to be honest about it. But I also understand that there's a lot of overlap that happens across all the different executives and teams, which is why I recommended having like a RACI framework. And that's where all the roles and responsibilities for all those different projects, They map out, who's doing the work, who's accountable for it, who's going to be consulted on certain tasks and situations, and then also who just needs to be informed. That's the best way I think about it, because there's too much going on to make a definite standard of, oh, this one person is accountable for everything, quite honestly. And that's also why I'm a big fan of having boards and councils as well.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. That like I mean, everything's changing so much, and there's so much broad responsibility here that to say that just one single owner is going to own 100% of it is probably naive, right? And I like your suggestion that like create a RACI, make it clear. Some organizations might find that they want to centralize it more under one person, but maybe for other organizations it makes sense to distribute that responsibility a little bit more.
All right, let's dive into governance as code. We're hearing this a lot. Policy as code, governance as code. Honest, no BS. What does that mean for you right now? And yeah, kick it off.
Yeah, sure. And I know I keep hinting at this, but yes, heavy DevSecOps background at IBM and their cloud department, which had a really good standards around that. And yeah, a lot of this pulls from that DevSecOps culture, which is DevSecOps, if you all aren't familiar, it integrates security practices directly into your CI/CD DevOps pipelines. And that's where you're hearing a lot of the shift left that's been occurring with that trend or the buzzword. But it starts at the earliest development stages of a product or a project. And that's where you're going to have automated checks. That was something where it's like container scanning, ST, DAST, things of that nature. It's just to make sure that your software is delivered securely, as automated as possible. And also it just has that shared culture of responsibility there to reduce risk, to reduce costs, things of that nature. Governance of a code is almost, I want to say, not even almost, it's like a subset of that, where you're going to translate the company's rules, the compliance rules for governance from those paper documents that we tend to overlook or just skim through and throw to the side into automated tests that are actually going to stand up inside your AIOps pipelines, whether that is MLOps, LLMOps, or even AgentOps. And those principles should be simple and direct. So here are the few different principles or ways that I think about it. One is codified. So those policies are going to be written in some type of structured, machine readable format. A lot of people use JSON. I'm used to JSON or YAML. And that's just going to remove the ambiguity of like natural language and trying to understand what things mean. The second one, version control, your standard GitHub, GitLab, some type of source control for everybody to be able to see, what is the current version of something, what was previously written. And also it just helps for tracking, reviewing, and also just making sure all of your logs and files are auditable at the compliance, when it's time for compliance work. Of course, automation, that's the thing there too. This is where you're going to have checks that automatically run. They're going to be in a platform like GitHub as well too. This is going to happen whenever, developer makes a change to the code base, or if a DevOps engineer makes a change to whatever automation framework that's there. And that is important because there's going to be an enforcement there of checks and balances that's going to be immediate and consistent. This is why makes it easier to ship products that are more safe and reliable and tested versus just, okay, well, it works on my machine and you just push it up and and that's that. And then the last one is auditable. And that's because the policies are code and the pipelines will log every action, or they're supposed to. There will be a complete immutable trail, and that's going to be generated automatically from this pipeline. And that way you can have verifiable proof that the controls were enforced or not enforced. So that's really what governance as a code means.
Love it. Codify, version control, automation, and it's auditable. But this all started with translate those governance rules which you have in your documents in your PDF.
Yep.
Who's doing that work? How is that being done?
Yes. So this is okay. The immediate people that will have to be there are obviously compliance teams, because they're the experts for compliance and understanding, and also they wrote a lot of the documents or were the main owners of that typically. And then the engineers as well too, if it's the engineering leads or the managers, so be it. And that's where they're going to work together to create those rules or the business requirements into the technical requirements.
Is this? My pause here is like there's so much is there so much regulation that is like, is this scalable to go do? I mean, I guess the answer here is like you always start small with something and keep
Yeah.
iterating. How much are you actually seeing this in practice? Because look, a lot of blah blah blah. I hear a lot of people talking about this, right?
Yeah.
We were at Gartner a couple of weeks ago, and policy is code, policy is code. Everyone's like, I get it. Makes sense.
Oh, really?
Who's actually? I mean, how are you seeing this? I'm like, this sounds great. What are the pitfalls? Like, what should people be prepared for? Like, hey,
You're right about that. And that's the thing. It does sound great, but in theory, the people who are actually implemented it is probably slim. And I just say that based off of the people I talk to. I wish I could give you a bunch of use cases. I cannot. I'm actually working on this with the first client. I mean, I've only been in my role for like a month or so, but I have a client that's actually on board with this, which is really cool because this is something I just came up around day to day when you and I were talking on. And then also just from being a DevOps person, even just seeing the way people were making their own CI/CD pipelines, there was even a lack of that. I think I just have an extremely privileged background of working at IBM and knowing what a good pipeline or robust pipeline looks like. As far as pitfalls, it is very, very easy again to feel like, oh, you have to implement everything, everything has to be perfect, or if I'm going to start small, I at least have to get this thing perfect before I can, move to the next one. I think that having some type of roadmap helps, just like you have an AI maturity roadmap, an AI strategy roadmap, you should have a DevOps roadmap as well too. With your baseline starting at, of course, data security, data access controls, and simple logging and monitoring, because that's what's necessary in order to have those feedback loops, and then increase from there.
get me thinking here. And Tim's, we have so many conversations about governance. Uh, I've actually don't think we've ever had even said the term governance maturity model or roadmap or stuff, because I know we've talked a lot about like what is our minimum valuable governance. Like that was a podcast episode that we also had with Rebecca O'Kill, who's the chief data analytics officer of Access Capital, and that's like that's your good story part. You have go to your minimal valuable governance. Like, I think everything you've talked about is like what's the smallest thing that's going to provide as much value as possible for a governance perspective, and you start iterating through that. But what is it? What does that look like from a maturity perspective? So like, when do you start doing policy as code? When do you start putting CI/CD? Like, is that the first thing you go do? Is that in the second stage, or no? I'm thinking about this, and like you're making me really think about what are people who are starting their governance. What is your roadmap and your strategy around that? I'm curious. What is a roadmap that you suggest here? Of people starting from, if they're starting from scratch and like they're listening to this right now, saying, "I'm going to go do this." What do they do on day one, and what happens afterwards?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so on day one, a lot of that is actually just getting what your North Star is for governance itself in relation to your AI strategy and what that looks like, as well as your business goals. What does that mean for you? What legislation or regulation should you be looking at outside of, the frameworks I've listed off? Because maybe if you're like fintech or healthcare, there are other things that you should be looking at that are important when you're working on your AI initiatives. So that is, as I said, your North Star. What does it mean for you to have to be ethical? What does it mean for you for fairness and bias? Like, who are your types of clients that could be impacted? What does that look? How much will the impact hurt them? Like things of that nature. So this is where you're getting your basic documents before you even think about policy as a code. Your governance charter, talking about establishing any type of governance teams, any type of risk tiering rubric, even doing an inventory of like what AI tools and things that you have before you start to jump and immediately create some type of plan. There's a lot of discovery that actually has to happen in order to set up a strong governance model, to have a strong governance organization within the company itself. Once you get that established, which can take some time, that could take months depending on how big your organization is, and that's okay. That's when you can start to actually create the frameworks as documents first of, this is the inventory that we have. These are the frameworks that we want to follow, the legislation we have to follow. This is how we want these things to be implemented inside of the departments. Once you have all those laid out with your compliance team, engineers should still be in the room to get an understanding of what that could look like down the line. That's when you start to think of policy as code. Like, for instance, do you even have an AI governance platform? Like, there might not be a need to add some CI/CD stuff around that if you already have that in place. You just want to make sure What are you going to use for vendors? Are you going to do like a built-in house? There's so many things to think about before you even start to code. And that's just like for engineers anyways. You don't get a task from Jira and immediately start coding. You have to architect what that will look like. You have to think about all the different trade-offs of the decisions that you'll make. It's all really strategy. It's governance strategy.
So it sounds like there's, in my mind, I've created a bit of a parallel between two things that I think I need to break apart because I actually think maybe they're different. Like I've thought of like engineers, for example, creating their unit tests and always those tests running before you merge your code as originally because I was thinking about that because and then kind of relating that to policy as code because when you develop, you should always do like kind of test-driven development, right? So you're building your tests as you go from the first moment, ideally, from the first sets of lines of code that you're putting on into your IDE, right?
Mhm.
But it sounds like policy as code is a little bit different. I mean, there's parallels, of course, right? But it's not like you can do it from scratch. It's not like you just if you don't have any kind of governance framework in place, then like what policy as code are you supposed to be implementing, right? So there are some differences between like, oh, I'm writing unit tests or something like that versus I'm implementing policy as code. Policy as code requires kind of a governance framework and model to be in place, or otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah, in order to have the policy converted into code, you have to have the policy, right? It's just similar to AI. Without no data, you don't have any AI. And that's why I say that, yeah, there should be guardrails in place for that. You have to test your policy, your documents to make sure they make sense before you try to put them into code. Because if you put them into code and they don't work, you're just going nowhere extremely fast, or worse, you're going backwards very, very fast.
Yeah,
So,
that makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah, I really like this governance and policy as code idea, and I feel like as a concept, it's been floating around for a while, and so I do hope it actually gets a little more traction because I think it's necessary, and maybe now that more and more development is shifting to AI driven kind of or AI created code, maybe we can actually kind of enforce this a little better. I find that sometimes agents listen to you better than humans do. But that being said, one thing I see that is a big struggle for folks. I'm going to create another parallel here. A lot of people talk about data contracts, right? And so I think that's sometimes a little bit more focused on like performance and quality than it is policy, but really it should kind of incorporate policy as well. But one thing people struggle with is like scope. Like where do I apply the policy as code or the contract, right? So for example, with data contracts, people seem to be kind of honing in now onto like the data product. They're like, oh, the data contract was on the data product, right? But that's not the only surface area that there is, right? You've got, application interfaces. You've got, if you're taking like a medallion architecture approach, you have like kind of your raw zone or your bronze zone or something like that where data is coming in. You can't just say like, oh, well, we don't have any policy on AI stuff that's related to that. It's like, no. Like you have to have some policy that applies to that too. So anyways, I don't know that there's an answer to my kind of rant here, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how to manage this issue of defining where policy as code or governance as code, where do you apply it?
Yeah, I mean, any AI systems, any AI models, any AI initiatives that you have, it's always going to be applied to that. To me, no matter what.
Mhm.
And I say that's why I said AI ops because yeah, if you're building in-house models, it's going to have your policy or governance as code is going to have to apply to that. Even if you're using third-party vendor models, you still have to do some type of monitoring or logging for that. So that works too. AI systems, AI agents, that goes there as well. So it just depends on where you start. Where you start depends on, I guess, at the bottom of whatever totem pole you have. So if you have
Mhm.
in-house models, you start there and work your way up. If it's just the vendors, you start with the vendors models and work your way up, so on and so forth. Yeah, there's no such thing as, oh, well, I have this AI thing and this AI thing, but we should only have it from one. Nope, it's all of them. Otherwise, your governance is not true governance. How can you?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're if you're doing testing only on parts of your app but not the other parts, then you're not really doing test-driven development. So I kind of hear you saying like obviously don't boil the ocean, right? You have to do this in an incremental approach, focus on what's valuable, follow your roadmap that we just talked about. But really governance's code should apply to everything,
Yep,
right?
I agree. It's the same thing as we talked about with the governance maturity model for AI strategy or AI roadmaps. You see, you're not going to immediately start tomorrow with like a fully autonomous systems. No, you want to start with finding some use cases, some pilots. Maybe it's a chatbot that doesn't have like PII or anything in it. Something small, and then you work your way up over time. And that even takes time. Like, most strategy roadmaps, they take 12 to 24 months really. So you're going to have to understand that you have to have patience to get your organization in order, to get to that future state, that future vision of seeing yourself as maybe a leader in AI in whatever industry that you're in. And also understand that there will be hiccups. That's part of the learning process, and that's also how you just really cement yourself into being a thought leader, a forward facing company in the within your industry itself. You also just have to keep in mind too, yes, there's hiccups, but how bad do you want those hiccups to be? And that's why the governance is there, and that's why that's important. There's a difference between, oh, we missed, implementing X, Y, and Z, or hey, we released a chatbot and it's just, doing things that are extremely harmful to people and causing lawsuits, and also 4% of our revenue is being taken away from us because we violated GDPR or something like that.
And the thing is that we do all this stuff, do this type of stuff already, like in software engineering, right?
Yeah.
So this is, as you said before, like this is not a new thing, right? It's probably just adding it to this current process that we have, or taking that existing process that is well-trodden territory and just start applying it in different places that don't have a formal codified process around that. And I think also another thing that just listening to you, both of you talk, is this is where this is product management too, just managing your scope and managing your surface area and figuring out what are we going to go start, and like not boil the ocean and stuff. And which I know we have product management, like we're building software or stuff, the trend of product management for data is there, if we have data product managers, are we now going to have AI product managers, or what, or I don't know, what are you?
Yeah, so they're already here, Juan. One of my good friends is actually a senior AI one in the GovTech space, and there's tons of roles popping up now. It's like one of the new sexy roles. There's so many of them. Yeah, just like data PMs, there's AI PMs that just focus on the AI side of things. I also think that they should be very looped into what GRC processes and what that looks like, as well as the AI development lifecycle. I think that a lot of people tend to skip over that and just focus on, oh, the cute, shiny, sexy agents. This is so great. That's part of why I released my Agent Ops article and like spoke a lot about that last year, about what that looks like for everybody on a cross collaboration AI team to build out this stuff. PMs have to think about building that scope into the work items that are necessary, that the business requirements and technical requirements to give engineers. They also have to think about it when it comes to even building this stuff out. Like it's governance starts at the beginning, at the planning stage. It's not supposed to be some bolt on at the end after you made an oopsie, or okay, I've already shipped and deployed everything. I guess we should just work on governance now because I guess whatever, we have to do it because it's compliance.
Yeah, like we talk about security as design, security by design, right? At the beginning,
Yep.
which is also too. You talk about engineers, and you talk about like folks who are boots on the ground, right? The ones who are building. Do you get, like, when you talk about this stuff, pushback? I'm like, that's not my job. Like, I mean, part of it going back to like the incentives, right? You said performance evaluation, but do people still push back on it? Like, no, why should I? That should not be part of my performance evaluation. No, that's not my job. Like, how do you? What do you hear? And share thoughts about that.
Absolutely. I remember asking engineers in the day-to-day Texas, I was like, hey, how many of you have looked at these frameworks and stuff? And then everybody just stared at me like, what is this? NIST? How do you even, is that a real thing? And I get it. Because even when I was in DevOps, I had no idea about all the compliance stuff like that. But as AI is just changing the rules of everything. There's such a huge convergence of roles. So yeah, they'll push back. It's not my job, or it wasn't supposed to be your job. I am taking a stance that engineers should move into being strategic engineers, where they help to influence the AI strategy and governance of an organization by learning to speak the language of business leaders, of compliance leaders, to ensure that everybody's on the same page with what is capable what technology is capable and not capable of doing. And instead of talking about it from the sense of, using a lot of tech jargon like we do, you convert that over to business impact and compliance impact as well. So that's looking at things such as, oh, well, the data quality is not down. Okay. Or data quality is not good. Okay. Well, what does that mean for the business leader who doesn't really care because they don't understand checklists and frameworks and a bunch of other monitoring dashboards and tools? You say, hey, data quality can tank, which means that our models will produce bad outputs, which could cost us X, Y, and Z. And are you willing to lose X, Y, and Z if we don't put X, Y, and Z in place? Those make their ears perk up because that's something that they are held accountable for, and now they have to figure out a problem. They understand what the problem is now because it's something that is in the language that they speak. And I think that's the best way to put things forward. And I understand that's more work, Kierra. That means we have to, come to them and explain things to them. Why won't they come to us? Well, if you want to be a leader, you can't always wait for somebody to come join you or to understand your side of things. That's why you're a strategic leader. And not only will this help you to be able to do work that is meaningful and won't get scrapped or you won't get pushback on later on, it also helps to show that you're a strategic partner. So in the event that you're looking for a promotion or a bonus, or even just for you to add in a particular idea you've been thinking about, the leaders are more receptive to hearing you out. They're also more receptive to putting you in a seat at the table because they already can trust on you to be reliable and to understand business. You are business savvy.
You know what listening to you right now, what I'm thinking, you said something which was engineers should become strategic engineers. And I always kind of I look at roles and they're like, is this an operational role? Is this a strategic role? Do you do a balance of both strategic operations? And arguably with AI, a lot of this operations can now be automated. I mean, people are writing code, like software engineer, like all the code is being written for you. What is actually most important is for you to think about, be strategic about what is the problem and how you're think. I want you to come up with the best algorithm to go writing the code that will be written by the AI, because if you give it the right input and you did a strategy behind that. So one could argue that the balance between operational and strategic, most of that operational work will be automated. Therefore, in that gap, are you going to do more operational work? Well, no, because the AI will get that operational work done. So that means that there is a gap, an expectation now that people are going to need to become strategic. And I think it's also an opportunity for using AI to help you become more strategic. Like, go put in that NIST or EUA Act and to Claude or ChatGPT and saying, why should I care about this? Explain this to me. Like, help me translate this. Like, I mean, that costs you nothing, and you're going to learn more around that stuff. And I think this is going to be the moment that we're challenge everybody in the industry is being challenged. And I think it's up to, by the way, it's not just about being a leader because I'm leading a team. Like, you can be a leader an IC is a leader. An IC can be very strategic. And I think everybody will be more strategic. And that's what's going to make the companies, more people can provide. Everybody should be providing more and more value. Anyways, I like this. That's a T-shirt right there. You become strategic engineers. I like that.
Thank you. I'm glad because I thought long and hard about that one, and I think it sounds cool. I'm a strategic engineer. Like you said, you don't always have to take on the official title of being a leader, but you should do that anyways, because at the end of the day, everybody has a responsibility to whatever their end goal is for their job, whether that is whatever the AI initiative is, maybe it's a business strategy, whatever it is, everybody's working together for the same thing. Therefore, you all are leaders. Also, in this day and age, as I mentioned with the convergence of roles, you can't just rest on your laurels with just knowing how to code, especially when every enterprise is picking up Claude Code, all those other things as well too. What do you do when work slop is a thing now? I think there was an article like 40% of people are dealing with work slop, and you're seeing
work slop. I like that.
And who was it? Was it Google, Amazon? They just recently had to roll back some changes because there were so many PRs from like bad AI written code getting pushed through the pipeline and causing outages. Who's responsible for that? I doubt that they're going to sit there and blame the agent. They're not going to say it was Copilot. Copilot made me do it. Well, the PR is in your name.
Yeah, exactly.
So what can you so you have to be accountable by nature. That's AI governance right there. So with that being said, Yes, having that strategy, being able to understand software architecture, understanding the trade-offs of different decisions you make, not just at the technical level, but the business level. What does this mean for the company? How does this impact us in a positive way or negative way? Those are going to be the things that engineers are going to have to think about, especially if they want to maintain or increase their job security now, when in this day and age, low-level tasks are easily being automated.
Really great kind of feedback and advice here. Just before we go to lightning, it's always fun when we can kind of look at some of the audience questions and things like that. I thought this was interesting. AI product managers are AI, governance leads. And I think that's an interesting comment because, we've been talking a little bit more about the engineering side. I don't think that product managers are accountable instead of engineers, right? I think we're very aligned on this idea that like engineers and governance as code is really, really valuable. But we do need to think about folks like product managers in terms of, would you push out a product to the market that couldn't scale and you knew was going to break? Right? Would you push out a product that you knew was completely insecure and anybody could find all the passwords to all the accounts? Like, no, right? And so there's a responsibility that we have as product leaders as well to take responsibility around these different things.
All right. All right. Lightning round.
All right.
Question number 1. Should every engineer have governance somewhere in their job description?
Yes.
Okay.
I love that. All right. I mean, they have testing in there. They have security in there, right?
Right. And a lot of those fall underneath governance anyways. That's so funny. Like, just everything really folds underneath each other. It's just like, it's everything's related at the end of the day.
You know what? As AI takes over the world, all of us are going to become governors and managers. That's right. All right. Question number 2. Is AI governance harder than cybersecurity governance?
That's a great question. I want to say no, because I think they're about the same, because again, they overlap with each other. Cybersecurity has governance as well too, and AI is like a sector or a subset of cybersecurity at this point.
Yeah.
If anything, if I had to just be like the straight and narrow, cybersecurity is going to be harder because they have a freaking infinite attack surface going on right now. In my mind, I cannot wrap my mind around what that means and how to actually like help prevent that or prevent hacks. Like, that's terrifying.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I was curious how you'd answer on that. And at some point we should talk more about that, because like I have a belief that like enterprises and IT systems are going to become more like organisms, and so cybersecurity is almost more like an immune system. But anyways, that's beer talk.
All right, we'll do that. All right, that's a good one for next time. Next question: can you do meaningful AI governance without governance as code?
I mean, this is a toughie because governance as a code is like a new thing, right? I believe that it's possible to do. Do you have to know that you're doing governance as code?
That's a good answer, back. Good. I like that. Let's keep it like that. That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, and governance as code is going to be the more scalable way to do this, right? If you really want to be sure it's happening right.
I agree. And so many orgs are already doing it. Even with Microsoft Copilot, you can set guardrails within those different softwares to, manage data usage and access control and things of that nature. So you might very well be doing it without even knowing that's what it is.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Last question. Will most companies have an AI collaboration charter in, let's say, the next 2 years?
You say most, but I'm thinking literally everyone, and I just want to say no. And I just say that because look at how badly or how many challenges we've had with data governance, and it's been like decades. Mm-hmm. So 2 years is very far-fetched, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yeah. Hopefully, right? Fingers crossed.
That's what my job is. So yes, all the companies come work with me. I will happily hook you up with data and AI governance, but of course, I know everybody in the world cannot find me.
All right, takeaway time. Tim, kick us off. Take us away with takeaways.
All right. Well, we started off with kind of honest, no BS. What do you mean that AI governance is everyone's problem? And you mentioned that, AI governance, tends to be owned by, compliance teams, or they center around kind of the rules and the controls, like don't get sued, don't lose reputation. The legal team, it's a very top down, rulesy, regulation forward kind of approach, and reactive, right? Oh, we got audited, crap, like tiger team, everybody use a bunch of spreadsheets, and it just, it's not a scalable approach. It's not a smart approach. It creates silos, creates a lot of missteps. And business leaders, kind of on the positive side, business leaders get excited about AI, but they aren't thinking about the risks, the guardrails, especially they aren't thinking about like how the rules and the regulations apply. So it's kind of a problem on both sides, right? There's all this excitement, but then it's a very reactive approach. You mentioned, one of our favorite analogies, the seatbelt is in the car, right? The brakes are in the car. Choose your analogy, right? So that you can drive faster, right? Race car drivers can go, hundreds, almost 200 miles an hour because of these things that are in place. And that's what we need to do in our businesses. We need to move so fast. How do we get engineers more interested in governance? Change management, right? Helping them understand how AI affects them. Educating about the frameworks, right, in the language they can understand, but things like NIST and ISO and EU AI Act, they're important. They have big impacts. We already do all sorts of work that's similar to AI governance. Think about configuration access, role-based access control, model cards and evaluations, right? So there's analogies we can tie to. And we can create an AI collaboration charter, which is a collaborative approach and document and kind of framework for the organization that becomes the strategy for governance for the group and creates accountability. So I think that's really good. And it's a very participatory process, like we mentioned about like cybersecurity, and you get reminded about like resetting your password and things like that, right? So it can be a participatory approach. We talked about incentives, so performance evaluation, tech debt, and making people understand how it affects that. Psychological safety, right? No one wants to be kind of the culprit of an issue, and empathy for the user and the customer and how they're going to be impacted. And then Juan asked about, there's so much governance and compliance happening everywhere across the organization. How do we even get this aligned, and who owns this, right? So you said, hey, your background's been in DevOps, and sort of CI/CD has to be your mindset and how you approach this. Don't try to boil the ocean. It's not about being perfect. It's about like a minimum governance approach at first. You iterate from there. It's everyone's responsibility, and you need to create a RACI, right? Because is it all going to roll up to the CISO? Is it all going to roll up to the chief data officer? It's very hard to really pinpoint, especially every organization is a little different. So put together that RACI so you get the clarity for your organization. Mm-hmm. And so much more. But Juan, what were your big takeaways?
So we got into governance as code, and what I really like, you bring your perspective from your background, your DevOps and SecOps background. So, because like we've already been doing all that type of stuff, you're bringing that to governance here. So first thing is translate your governance rules, which usually live in documents, and that should be in your DevOps, your MLOps, your DataOps code. 4 things: codify, JSON, YAML, whatever it is, version control in GitHub, automation, the checks that automatically run, and it's auditable. That's how you have the verifiable proof. But we all started like, how do you actually do this? This is you're still taking your text and you turn it into code. Governance people, engineering leads, right? The compliance people, like they're the people who understand this. They need to be in the room to be able to go do this. But also note that you need to have a roadmap. You're not going to go boil the ocean. Again, it's always a theme, not boil the ocean. Roadmap. What is your North Star? What are the goals you have? What are the regulations that you're most concerned about? They're going to affect your business and so forth. Start with that, and then you're going to start kind of building from there little by little. So policy of code isn't something you just jump into. It's something to start small, and you're going to kind of go and iterate around that. And yes, there'll always be hiccups, but how bad do you want those hiccups to be? I really like that. Talk a little bit about like what is the pushback that you get? And you said, well, hey, engineers, you need to become strategic engineers. That's a t-shirt. Like, are you a strategic engineer? Anyways, so much stuff in here. How did we do? I know we could go more. Anything specifically missed or got wrong?
No, all of that was awesome. I think y'all did a pretty good job of summing up all the words that I mentioned.
All right, so to wrap up, 3 final questions before we leave.
Oh.
What's your advice about data, AI, or life, whatever you want? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
Oh, yes. So first question was advice. I think for me, dang it, that's a really good one. Okay, so if I'm giving it to engineers, Yes, don't be afraid to just learn something new that's outside of engineering, the cool, like the shiny new tech toy, new AI skills, something like that. Just because not only will it help you to cross domain knowledge always helps. I I'm multidisciplinary just by choice. I'm AI, DevOps, data. I've been data architect as well. I've done a bunch of different things, and that's all help to inform the decisions that I make today, even how I even landed my job, my role here. So don't be afraid to adopt new technologies, new lines of thinking, because it all helps strengthen you at the end of the day. I don't even think that's just for engineers. That's in general. That's really how I live my life.
Like advice. Okay.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, there's no thing is, oh man, if I learn this, well, then I'm losing X, Y, and Z. No, it all helps to shape your character and who you are as a person, and also the valuable advice that you can give to someone else. Second question, which was,
Invite next.
oh, invite next. Ooh,
Or a topic or an area in case you don't have a name in mind. Or
I would like this. Have you had somebody on change management yet?
no, I don't think so.
Kind of indirectly, but not
That's
like
good.
directly.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I love change management. You could be great if you could find an expert for that.
Okay.
And then the third one
What
is,
resources do you follow? What are the blogs, newsletters, magazines, conferences, events?
okay, yeah. Since I moved into AI strategy, I'm a huge fan of Vin Vashista's work. 10 out of 10. Stuart went to tears as well too. Nina Ndukwe, she's amazing too. She's more so on the code quality type of work, which is really good for engineers because that's a lot of that is really useful for people that use AI coding tools. She shows how to actually use those strategically and effectively instead of just taking whatever output that Claude Code gives you and putting it into a PR. Who else? Oh, Jenna Jordan. She's amazing. I feel like I'm just going to ramble off a bunch of the top people that we all follow. But yeah.
Join us shortly.
Dominique Lippius Shelton. She's awesome too because she's on the data governance side of law. So I actually like following a diverse set of people. It just really helps instead of staying in just.
Looks like we should have all those people on the podcast too.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, sorry.
Those names. Kierra, this was fantastic. I'm sure we're going to go do something soon again in person. It'll be here because we're all in Austin. Thank you so much for sharing, being very direct, honest, no BS around stuff. And I love how we ask you questions. You know your stuff. I really appreciate this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm enjoying it with y'all. Oh yeah, let me get my cheers and my chamomile tea.
There you go. Cheers.